The fog in San Francisco doesn't just roll in. It swallows the city whole, hiding the Golden Gate Bridge and the sins of the wealthy in equal measure. Lucas sat in his home office, the glow of spreadsheets reflecting in his glasses, while his wife's laughter echoed from the hallway, a sound too bright, too nervous for a Tuesday night. He knew the numbers didn't add up, not in the bank accounts he audited, and certainly not in his marriage. There is a terrifying moment when you realize the person you promised forever to is just waiting for the lease to expire. If you want to witness the moment the contract breaks and the real cost is calculated, stay with me. The fog outside the panoramic window of the Pacific Heights condo was thick enough to taste. It pressed against the glass, turning the lights of the Golden Gate Bridge into smeared, ghostly halos. Inside, the air was climate-controlled, filtered, and silent, save for the rhythmic clicking of Lucas's keyboard. Lucas sat at his glass desk, illuminated only by the blue light of 3 monitors. He was a forensic accountant, a man paid to find the needles and haystacks of corporate greed. He looked for patterns, a rounded number where a decimal should be, a vendor with a P.O. box but no office, a sudden spike in expenses. Tonight, however, the spreadsheet on his screen wasn't for a Fortune 500 company. It was the Joint American Express statement. Spago, Beverly Hills, $450, 00. The Ritz-Carlton, Half Moon Bay, $820, 00. Lucas adjusted his glasses. Natalie had told him she was hosting an open house in Marin County last weekend. She said the staging costs were high. She said she had to stay overnight because the client was demanding. The front door unlocked with a digital beep. Lucas didn't spin around in his chair. He watched the reflection in the dark window. Natalie entered, dropping her keys into the ceramic bowl. The sound was sharp, clattering. She paused, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, smoothing her hair. She looked radiant, flushed with a kind of energy that the damp San Francisco night usually stole from people. "I'm home," she called out. Her voice had a lilt to it, a forced cheerfulness. "In the office," Lucas replied. His voice was steady, monotone. Natalie appeared in the doorway. She was wearing her closing suit, a sharp navy blazer and a skirt that showed off her legs. But underneath the professional attire, Lucas noticed details others might miss. Her lipstick was reapplied, slightly darker than her usual shade. Her hair was a little too tousled for a day of showing properties. And the smell. As she walked over to kiss him on the cheek, it hit him. Not the rain, not her usual Chanel perfume, but a faint, underlying scent of sea salt, sweat, and a musk that definitely wasn't his. "You're working late again," she sighed, leaning against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "You missed dinner." "I wasn't hungry," Lucas said, finally turning his chair to face her. "How was the showing?" "Exhausting," Natalie said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "These tech buyers are impossible. They want smart homes, but don't know how to use a light switch. I had to stay until 8 just to walk them through the security system." Lucas nodded. "The security system took 3 hours?" Natalie blinked. A micro-expression of panic flitted across her face before she buried it under a smile. "And then drinks with the seller. You know how it is. Networking. Right? Networking." Lucas turned back to his screens. "By the way, the fraud alert on the Amex went off today." The silence in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Oh." Natalie's voice was higher now. "What for?" "A charge at a surf shop in Santa Cruz. For $100. Men's wetsuit." Natalie laughed, but it was brittle. "Oh, that was a gift for a client. He's a big surfer. Closing gift. You know, you have to spend money to make money." "A client," Lucas repeated. "Yes, Lucas. A client. God, why do you always sound like you're deposing me?" She pushed off the doorframe, her defensive posture ramping up. "I'm out there hustling, trying to sell these overpriced boxes to tech bros, and you sit here in the dark analyzing my receipts. It's suffocating." She turned and walked toward the master bedroom. "I'm taking a shower. Don't stay up." Lucas listened to her footsteps fade. He waited until he heard the hiss of the shower turning on. He minimized the credit card statement. He opened a new window, the browser history of the iPad she had left on the kitchen island this morning. He had synced it to his server weeks ago, a precaution he hoped he'd never have to use. He scrolled past the Zillow listings and the interior design blogs. He stopped at a search from 3 days ago. Best romantic hikes, Santa Cruz, Jack's Fit Instagram. How to know if he's your soulmate. Lucas took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. The fatigue hit him then, not physical tired, but a deep, structural exhaustion. He looked around the condo. The minimalist Italian furniture, the abstract art, the view of the city he had worked 80-hour weeks to afford. It was all depreciating assets. He didn't scream. He didn't go into the bathroom and demand the truth. That wasn't how Lucas worked. In his line of work, you didn't make an arrest until the evidence was undeniable. You let the target get comfortable. You let them think they were getting away with it. You let them dig the hole so deep they couldn't climb out. He opened a new folder on his desktop and named it simply, Case File, Natalie. Inside, he dragged the screenshot of the surf shop charge. Deposition, he whispered to the empty room. Not yet, Natalie, but soon. The rain began to beat against the glass, a chaotic rhythm against the ordered silence of his life. Lucas put his glasses back on. He had work to do. The morning fog had not lifted. It had merely changed texture, turning from a soft gray gauze into a hard, metallic sheet that pressed against the windows of the Pacific Heights condo. Natalie left at 7:30 a.m. She was a flurry of motion, grabbing her matcha latte, checking her reflection in the foyer mirror, adjusting her silk scarf. She kissed Lucas on the top of his head as he sat at the kitchen island with his black coffee. "Don't wait up," she said, her voice bright. "I have a networking dinner with the developers for the Soma project. It's going to be a late one." "Have fun," Lucas said, not looking up from his tablet. "Drive safe." The door clicked shut. The lock engaged. The silence of the apartment returned, heavy and expensive. Lucas didn't go to his firm's office downtown. He walked calmly to the front door, engaged the deadbolt, and returned to his home office. He sat down in his Herman Miller chair and cracked his knuckles. It was time to work. In his profession, Lucas knew that people lied, but numbers never did. People could fake smiles, fake orgasms, and fake happiness, but they could not fake a bank transfer. Every dollar left a trail, a digital footprint that screamed the truth if you knew how to listen. He logged into their joint bank accounts first. Nothing obvious there aside from the wetsuit charge he had flagged the night before. Natalie was smarter than that. She was a realtor. She knew how to move money through escrow, how to bury costs in staging and marketing. He opened the portal for Natalie Sells SF LLC, the limited liability company they had set up for her business expenses. As her husband, he was the registered agent. As a forensic accountant, he had admin access she had likely forgotten about. He pulled the raw data for the last 6 months and exported it into a spreadsheet. He began to filter. Category, marketing. Category, staging. Category, consulting. The numbers were high. Too high. Even for a luxury market, the staging costs were astronomical. He clicked on a recurring payment, $2,800 a month, to a vendor listed as Apex Visuals Incorporated. Lucas opened a separate browser window and ran a background check on Apex Visuals. The business license was registered 6 months ago. The registered address wasn't a photography studio or a staging warehouse. It was a residential loft in the Mission District. A bachelor pad. The registered owner, Jackson Jax Miller. Lucas felt a cold prickle at the base of his neck. He minimized the window and went back to the spreadsheet. He cross-referenced the dates. $4,500 for website development, paid to JaxFit. $1,200 for social media consulting, paid to JaxFit. $650 for client entertainment at a steakhouse in the marina on a Tuesday when Lucas was in New York. He wasn't just looking at an affair. He was looking at embezzlement. Natalie wasn't just sleeping with this man. She was investing in him. She was taking the money Lucas earned, the money that paid the mortgage on this condo, the money intended for their future children, and she was pouring it into a 26-year-old fitness influencer with a loft in the Mission. Lucas typed quickly, his fingers flying across the mechanical keyboard. He needed more. He needed the context. He accessed the cloud backup for her laptop again. He bypassed the photos this time and went straight to the Notes app. It was password protected, but Natalie used the same 4 digits for everything. The year they met. The folder unlocked. There was a note titled Manifestation Board. Lucas opened it. It wasn't a list of houses to sell. It was a list of dreams. Jax's brand launch, October. Bali retreat with J, November. Leave the heavy energy behind, L. Heavy energy. That was him. That was what he had become to her. A heavy anchor of stability that kept her from floating away into her fantasy life. He sat back, taking off his glasses to rub his tired eyes. The screen blurred. He had built his life on the principles of risk management and asset protection. He had thought Natalie was a partner, a blue-chip stock that would grow over time. But looking at the ledger in front of him, seeing the thousands of dollars siphoned away to fund another man's ego, he realized the truth. She was a liability. A toxic asset. And in the world of finance, when an asset becomes toxic, you don't hold on to it hoping it will recover. You don't ask it why it failed. You liquidate. Lucas put his glasses back on. The sadness was there, a dull ache in his chest, but it was being rapidly overtaken by a cold, sharp rage. He opened a new email draft, addressed to his lawyer. He didn't send it yet. He needed to see the investment with his own eyes. He checked the time. 11 a.m. Apex Visuals Incorporated. The loft in the Mission. Lucas stood up and grabbed his coat. He wasn't going to the office. He was going to inspect the property. Lucas didn't drive to the Mission District. A quick cross-reference of the Apex Visuals invoices with Natalie's public Zillow listings gave him a more precise location. The most recent invoice for art installation and consulting was tagged to a property on El Camino del Mar in Sea Cliff. It was a fortress of a house, perched on the edge of the cliffside, overlooking the gray, churning Pacific. The listing price was $12 million. The description promised unrivaled views and emotional architecture. Lucas parked his Audi a block away, tucked behind a line of landscaping trucks. He didn't walk to the front door. He knew the layout of these events. He had reviewed enough of Natalie's security protocols. Instead, he walked along the public coastal trail that ran behind the properties, obscured by the cypress trees and the heavy, wet mist rolling off the ocean. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass of the rear living room, the house glowed like a lantern. It was staging perfection, beige linen sofas, abstract art that meant nothing, and orchids that cost more than a car payment. There were a few people milling about, potential buyers holding flutes of champagne, nodding at the view. And there was Natalie. She was standing near the fireplace, wearing a cream-colored dress that hugged her frame, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked radiant, playing the part of the successful, carefree agent. But she wasn't looking at the buyers. She was looking at a man standing by the grand piano. Lucas adjusted his position behind the trunk of a cypress tree, the bark rough against his palm. He recognized the man from the background check. Jax. He was younger than Lucas, perhaps 26 or 27. He wore a t-shirt that was too tight and a blazer that looked expensive but didn't quite fit, likely bought with the consulting fees Lucas had uncovered that morning. He had the kind of messy, unkempt hair that required gel to perfect, and a posture that screamed arrogance. To the casual observer, they were just two people in a room. But Lucas was a student of microexpressions and proximity. He watched as the other guests drifted toward the kitchen for hors d'oeuvres. Natalie and Jax were left momentarily alone in the sunken living room. The shift was instantaneous. Natalie's professional posture collapsed. She leaned in, her body angling toward him like a plant seeking the sun. Jax said something. Lucas couldn't hear it through the glass and the wind, and Natalie threw her head back and laughed. It was a genuine, throat-bearing laugh. Then, the touch. It happened in a second. Jax reached out and brushed a stray hair from her forehead, his hand lingering on her cheek. It was a gesture of ownership. Natalie didn't pull away. She leaned into his palm, closing her eyes for a heartbeat. Lucas felt a physical blow to his chest, harder than any number on a spreadsheet. In that glass house, surrounded by furniture that didn't belong to them, they were playing a game of domestic fantasy. Natalie was pretending this was her life. Youthful, dangerous, passionate. She was using Lucas's stability as the foundation to build a stage for her lover. Jax whispered something else, and Natalie swatted his arm playfully, biting her lip. She looked alive. Lucas looked down at his own hand resting on the tree. It was pale, steady, ringed by the gold band he had placed on his finger 5 years ago. He realized then that he wasn't just observing infidelity. He was observing a transaction. Natalie was trading her dignity and his money for a feeling. She was buying the sensation of being 25 again. The wind picked up, biting through Lucas's coat. He didn't need to go inside. He didn't need to hear their voices. The data was corroborated. He watched one last time as a new couple entered the room. Natalie immediately straightened, the mask sliding back into place. Jax stepped away, shoving his hands in his pockets, playing the role of the aloof artist. They were good actors, but the show was about to be canceled. Lucas turned away from the glowing house and walked back toward his car. The fog swallowed the view of the ocean, leaving him in a world of gray. He took his phone out and dialed a number he had saved but never used. "This is Lucas Vance," he said when the voice on the other end answered. "I need to schedule a consultation. Full forensic audit of personal assets. And I need a divorce attorney who specializes in financial infidelity." He hung up, started the car, and drove back toward the city. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm. Left, right. Truth, lie. Sold, sold. Natalie returned home at 11:15 p.m. She was buzzing with a manic sort of energy, the kind that comes from too much champagne and the adrenaline of getting away with something illicit. She kicked off her heels in the hallway, letting them lie where they fell, a small act of disorder in Lucas's meticulously ordered world. "Lucas," she called out, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You missed a great event. We got 3 offers over asking." She walked into the living room, unbuttoning her blazer. She froze. Lucas was sitting in the armchair, facing the door. The television was off. The lights were dimmed, save for a single floor lamp that cast long, sharp shadows across the room. On the marble coffee table, there were no magazines, no coasters, no remotes. There was only a black 3-ring binder, 2 inches thick. "What is this?" Natalie asked, her smile faltering but not yet breaking. "Are we working late?" "Sit down, Natalie," Lucas said. His voice was devoid of inflection. It was the voice he used when he had to tell a CEO that his CFO was stealing from the pension fund. Natalie bristled. "I'm tired, Lucas. I've been on my feet for 6 hours. I don't have time for one of your lectures on household budgeting." "It's not a budget," Lucas replied, gesturing to the binder. "It's an audit." She stared at him for a moment, then huffed, dropping onto the sofa opposite him. She crossed her arms, defensive. "Fine. Make it quick." Lucas leaned forward and flipped the binder open. He didn't speak. He simply turned the pages, one by one, facing her. Page 1, a high-resolution photo of Natalie and Jax at the open house, taken from the coastal trail. The intimacy of her hand on his face was undeniable. Page 2, the incorporation papers of Apex Visuals Incorporated, linking Jax's name to the payments. Page 3, a spreadsheet highlighting $42,000 in transfers from their joint savings to various consulting vendors over the last 6 months. Page 4, a screenshot of her text message thread. "He's an ATM, baby. Just wait until the bonus hits." The silence in the room stretched, tight and suffocating like a rubber band about to snap. Natalie looked at the photos. Then she looked at the numbers. Her face went pale, then blotchy red. She didn't cry. She didn't cover her mouth in shock. Her eyes narrowed, and her jaw set hard. "You followed me," she hissed. "You stalked me." "I verified my assets," Lucas corrected. "And I found a significant leak." "Is that all I am to you?" Natalie stood up, her voice rising to a shriek. "Assets? Liabilities? A leak in your damn spreadsheet? This is exactly why I did it, Lucas. Look at you. You're a robot. You sit here in the dark calculating interest rates while I'm out there trying to feel something. You stole $40,000, Natalie. That's not a feeling. That's felony embezzlement. It was an investment, she shouted, pacing the room. Jax has talent. He has vision. He's going to be huge. He just needs a runway. Something you would never understand because you're too busy playing it safe. You're boring, Lucas. You are painfully, suffocatingly boring. The words were meant to eviscerate him. They were meant to make him plead, to make him promise to change, to be more exciting, more like the 26-year-old in the photo. Lucas didn't flinch. He looked at her with the same expression he wore when looking at a depreciating asset. So, Lucas said, closing the binder with a soft snap. You're betting on him. Yes, Natalie said, breathless, her chest heaving. I am. He makes me feel alive. He sees me. He doesn't just look through me like I'm a line item. I'm leaving you, Lucas. I'm going to help Jax build his empire, and we're going to be happy. Real happiness. Not this sterile, air-conditioned prison you've built. She waited for the explosion. She wanted him to throw something, to scream, to prove he had blood in his veins. Lucas stood up slowly. He smoothed the front of his shirt. Understood, he said. Natalie blinked, thrown off balance. Understood? That's it. You've made your position clear, Lucas said, picking up the binder. You believe Jax is the growth asset. You believe I am the stagnation. I accept your assessment. He walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a small carry-on bag he had packed an hour ago. What are you doing? Natalie asked, her voice wavering slightly. I'm removing myself from the equation, Lucas said. You have the weekend. Jax has a branding retreat in Napa, doesn't he? I saw the reservation on the visa. You should go. Celebrate. You're kicking me out? No, Lucas said, opening the front door. The fog swirled in, cold and damp. I'm leaving you with the house. And the mortgage. And the lease payments on the car. And the credit card bills. He looked at her one last time. There was no love in his eyes, no hate. Just a complete and total absence of investment. Good luck with the empire, Natalie. He stepped out into the hall and closed the door. The lock clicked shut with a finality that echoed in the empty corridor. Inside, Natalie stood alone in the perfect living room, trembling not with fear, but with a strange, hollow victory. She had won. She had chosen. She just didn't realize yet that she had chosen a ghost. The weekend arrived with a rare burst of sunshine, a cruel trick of the Bay Area microclimate that made everything look hopeful. Natalie left the condo at 10 in the morning on Friday. She didn't look back. She threw a duffel bag into the trunk of her leased Mercedes, picked up Jax from a street corner in the Mission. He didn't have a car, and sped off toward Napa Valley. Lucas watched from the balcony. He saw Jax put his feet up on the dashboard. He saw Natalie laughing, the sunroof open, her hair whipping in the wind. They looked like a car commercial. They looked expensive. As soon as the car disappeared around the corner, Lucas turned back inside and looked at his watch. 10:15 a.m. Operation Liquidation had commenced. He didn't trash the apartment. He didn't cut up her clothes or spray paint insults on the walls. Those were acts of passion, and Lucas had no passion left for this entity. Instead, he operated with the clinical precision of a surgeon removing a necrotic limb. First, the utilities. The electricity, the high-speed fiber internet, the premium cable package, all were in his name. He called each provider. Service termination effective Monday morning. Next, the landlord. Their lease had a diplomacy clause, a benefit of his high-level corporate contracts, allowing for immediate termination due to job relocation. He had already signed the papers with his firm's Chicago branch. He emailed the signed PDF to the property management company, paying the 2-month penalty fee from his personal account. He was legally off the hook. The lease was now solely Natalie's responsibility. If she wanted to stay in this 3-bedroom view of the bay, she would have to requalify on her own income. Lucas knew her credit score. She wouldn't qualify for a studio in the Tenderloin. Then came the banking. He walked to the Chase branch on Geary Street. He sat across from a personal banker who looked concerned by the sudden activity. Lucas authorized the closure of the joint savings account. He transferred exactly 50% of the balance to Natalie's personal checking account. He was fair, legally speaking, and wired the other 50% to a new account in Illinois. Then, the credit cards. I need to remove an authorized user. Lucas told the banker. Which card, sir? The reserve card. And the platinum. Remove Natalie Vance. Effective immediately. She will be declined on her next transaction, sir. Do you want to notify her? Lucas thought about the weekend in Napa. The tasting menus at the French Laundry. The boutique hotel suite Jax had likely insisted on. The consulting fees she was planning to charge to the card. No, Lucas said. The bank will notify her when the card is swiped. He left the bank and returned to the empty condo. He packed only what mattered. His tailored suits, his monitors, his laptop, and the watch his father had given him. He left the furniture. He left the appliances. He left the wedding photos in their silver frames on the mantelpiece. They were props for a life that no longer existed. At 4 p.m., a courier arrived to pick up his boxes for shipping. At 5 p.m., Lucas placed his house keys on the kitchen counter, right next to the empty space where the espresso machine used to sit. He took out his phone. He opened the carrier app. Family plan, 2 lines. He selected line 2, Natalie's iPhone, and clicked the link account. She would have service for the rest of the billing cycle, and then she would be on her own. He walked out the door and didn't lock it. He didn't look back. The Uber ride to SFO was quiet. The driver didn't try to make conversation, for which Lucas was grateful. He watched the city blur past, the tech towers, the billboards, the fog rolling back in to reclaim the hills. It was a beautiful city, but it was a city of ghosts. He checked in for flight UA 714 to Chicago O'Hare. One way, first class. As he sat in the lounge, sipping a sparkling water, his phone buzzed. It wasn't Natalie. She was likely 3 glasses of Cabernet deep, blissfully unaware that the credit card in her purse was now just a piece of plastic. It was an automated notification from the smart home system he hadn't disconnected yet. Thermostat set to away mode. Lucas deleted the app from his phone. He boarded the plane as the sun began to set. He buckled his seatbelt and closed his eyes. For the first time in 6 months, the knot of anxiety in his chest, the constant need to monitor, to fix, to provide, uncoiled. He wasn't a husband anymore. He wasn't a safety net. He was just a man on a plane, flying toward the cold, clean winter of the Midwest. The pilot announced their departure. As the wheels lifted off the tarmac, leaving the West Coast behind, Lucas didn't feel sadness. He felt the pure, mathematical satisfaction of a balanced ledger. The audit was complete. The wind off Lake Michigan had a name, the Hawk, and tonight, it was hunting. It tore through the streets of downtown Chicago, rattling the windows of the skyscrapers and turning the breath of commuters into instant clouds of ice. Lucas stepped out of the black car in front of his new corporate apartment building in the Loop. The temperature was 10 degrees below zero. The cold hit him like a physical slap, burning his exposed skin, freezing the moisture in his nostrils. He didn't flinch. He inhaled it deep into his lungs. It felt clean. It felt like anesthesia. He checked into the temporary housing provided by the firm. It was a studio on the 42nd floor, furnished in generic grays and chromes. It lacked the warmth of the Pacific Heights condo. It lacked the view of the ocean. But it also lacked the lies. Lucas threw his suitcase on the bed, walked to the window, and looked down at the grid of the city. Here, everything was straight lines and right angles. No winding coastal roads. No fog to hide in. 2,000 miles away, the fog was burning off in Napa Valley. Natalie was standing at the mahogany reception desk of the Auberge du Soleil. She was glowing, flushed from a weekend of spa treatments, wine tasting, and the intoxicating rush of being with Jax. Jax was waiting by the valet stand, wearing his sunglasses inside, scrolling through the photos they had taken, already planning his next Instagram caption, living the dream. #hustle, #grateful. I hope you enjoyed your stay, Mrs. Vance, the receptionist said with a practiced smile. The total comes to $3,420, including the room service and the spa package. Natalie smiled, reaching into her purse. She pulled out the heavy metal reserve card, Lucas's card. She handed it over with the casual arrogance of someone who had never had to count the zeros on a bill. Put it on this, she said. The receptionist swiped the card. She waited. She frowned. She swiped it again. I'm sorry, the receptionist said, her voice dropping a decibel. "The card has been declined." Natalie laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "That's impossible. It has a $50,000 limit. Try it again." "I have, ma'am. The code is pickup card/do not honor. It means the account holder has reported it lost or revoked authorization." The heat rushed to Natalie's face. She could feel the eyes of the couple standing in line behind her. She looked over at Jax. He wasn't paying attention. He was taking a selfie with the valet. "There must be a mistake," Natalie whispered. She pulled out the platinum card. "Try this one." Swipe. Wait. Declined. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the wine hangover. Lucas never missed a bill. Lucas was the most financially fastidious man she knew. Unless, "Do you have another form of payment?" the receptionist asked, her smile now tight and impatient. Natalie's hand trembled as she reached for her own personal debit card. The card attached to the account where her fluctuating commission checks went. She did the mental math. She had a mortgage payment pending. She had car insurance. "Use this," she said, her voice small. The transaction approved. But as she signed the receipt, she knew she had just wiped out her liquidity for the month. The drive back to San Francisco was silent. Jax was asleep in the passenger seat, mouth open, oblivious. Natalie drove with a knot in her stomach. She tried to call Lucas. Straight to voicemail. She tried to text him. Delivered, but no read receipt. They arrived at the condo at 4 p.m. Natalie unlocked the door, expecting to find Lucas in his office, expecting to scream at him, to demand an explanation for the embarrassment at the hotel. The condo was silent. "Babe, it's freezing in here," Jax complained, shivering as he walked in with his weekender bag. "Why is the heat off?" Natalie walked into the living room. The thermostat was blank. She flipped the light switch. Nothing. "Lucas?" she yelled. No answer. She walked to the kitchen island. The espresso machine was gone. The keys were there, Lucas's keys, sitting next to a white envelope. Natalie tore the envelope open. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't a plea. It was a formal letter from the property management company. "Dear resident, we have received notice of lease termination from the primary leaseholder, Mr. Lucas Vance. As per the diplomacy clause in your contract, the lease has been dissolved effective immediately due to relocation. You have 30 days to vacate the premises or submit a new application for tenancy with proof of income meeting the 3x rent requirement." Natalie dropped the paper. She looked around the darkening apartment. The furniture was still there, but the life was gone. She ran to the bedroom. The closet was half empty. His suits, his shoes, his watch box, gone. Jax walked up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, nuzzling her neck. "What's going on? Is the power out? We should go out for dinner. I'm starving. Let's go to that sushi place on Fillmore." Natalie pulled away from him. She looked at this beautiful, useless boy who had just cost her $3,000. Then she looked at the empty side of the closet. "He's gone," Natalie whispered. "Who? The boring guy?" Jax laughed. "Good riddance, right? Now we have the place to ourselves." "No, Jax," Natalie said, her voice trembling. "You don't understand. He didn't just leave. He turned the lights off." In Chicago, Lucas sat in the dark of his studio apartment, illuminated only by the glow of his laptop. He opened a new spreadsheet. New life projection. Row 1, rent. Row 2, savings. Row 3, peace. He typed in the numbers. The formula balanced perfectly. The jazz club in the basement of the Chicago Loop Hotel was dark, smelling of mahogany, old books, and expensive bourbon. It was the kind of place that valued substance over flash, the exact opposite of the scene Natalie used to drag Lucas to in the Marina District. Lucas sat in a leather booth, watching the saxophone player close his eyes as he hit a low, mournful note. Across from him sat Claire. She was a corporate attorney for the firm's biggest merger client. She wore glasses, had her hair pulled back in a severe bun, and possessed a mind that moved faster than the market. "You're analyzing the room again," Claire said, her voice amused. She took a sip of her Pinot Noir. "You've checked the exits, estimated the daily revenue based on the cover charge, and you're wondering if the bartender is pouring heavy." Lucas smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. It had taken him a year to find it again. Occupational hazard. I see patterns. And what pattern do you see in me? She asked, leaning forward. Lucas looked at her. He didn't see a project. He didn't see someone asking him to finance a fantasy. He saw an equal. I see someone who pays her own bills, he said softly. Claire laughed, a warm, throaty sound. High praise from the head of forensic audit. But you're still guarding something, Lucas. You have a vault door on your chest. What's the combination? It's not a vault, Lucas said, swirling his drink. It's a risk assessment. I made a bad investment once. I poured everything into a volatile asset, and I lost the principal. I'm just diversified now. Smart, Claire said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with hers. Her skin was warm. But you can't accumulate interest if you don't put anything in the market. 2,000 miles west, the fog was choking the streets of Daly City. It was a bleak suburb south of San Francisco, where the houses were identical pastel boxes and the sun rarely broke through. Natalie sat on the floor of the one-bedroom apartment she now shared with Jax. The Pacific Heights condo was a distant memory, lost 3 months after Lucas left when she couldn't prove 3x the monthly rent. The Mercedes was gone, repossessed when she missed 2 payments. Now, she drove a used Honda Civic that smelled faintly of wet dog. The apartment was a mess. Supplements, protein powder tubs, and tripod equipment littered the living room. Jax was on the sofa, shirtless, playing a video game. The sound of machine gun fire from the TV was the soundtrack to Natalie's life. She held her phone, taking photos of a handbag. It was a quilted Chanel flap bag, a gift from Lucas for their 3rd anniversary. It was one of the few things she had left of value. Listing price, $3,500. Buy it now. Babe, Jax called out without looking away from the TV. Did you transfer the money for the gym membership? They wouldn't let me in today. It was embarrassing. Natalie lowered the phone. She looked at the peeling paint on the wall. She looked at Jax's back. The muscles she used to find so intoxicating now just looked like expensive maintenance. I don't have it, Jax, she said, her voice thin. I had to pay the electric bill, and the rent is due on Tuesday. Jax paused the game. He sighed, a heavy, exaggerated sound of martyrdom. He turned around. Nat, we talked about this. You have to support the vision. My follower count is up to 50,000. The sponsorship deals are coming. I just need you to hold it down for a little longer. Don't be negative. Negative energy blocks abundance. Abundance doesn't pay for groceries, Natalie snapped. I'm selling the Chanel bag, Jax. The one Lucas gave me. Good, Jax said, turning back to the screen. You don't need that energy from the past anyway. It's deadweight. Just transfer the cash as soon as it sells, okay? I need to buy some new lighting gear. Natalie looked at him, really looked at him. She remembered the binder Lucas had left. Page 4, he's an ATM, baby. She realized with a sickening lurch in her stomach that the roles hadn't just reversed, they had calcified. She wasn't the partner. She wasn't the muse. She was the ATM, and she was running on empty. She looked down at the Chanel bag. It was beautiful, structured, and timeless. It was quality. She touched the cold metal of the clasp. Lucas, she whispered to herself. What did you say? Jax asked. Nothing, Natalie said. She posted the listing. Sold in 5 minutes. She stared at the notification. She had liquidated the last piece of the man who loved her to feed the man who was using her. The depreciation was complete. She was now in the red. The eviction notice was pink. It was taped to the peeling beige paint of the front door like a scar. Natalie stood in the hallway of the apartment complex, holding a bag of generic groceries, ramen, eggs, a bottle of cheap vodka, staring at the paper. 3-day notice to pay rent or quit. She ripped it down, her fingernails tearing the paper. It was a mistake. It had to be. She had transferred the money to Jax 3 days ago. She had sold her diamond earrings, the ones Lucas had given her for her 30th birthday, to cover this month's rent. She had put the cash in Jax's hand. She had watched him put it in his wallet. She unlocked the door. The apartment was dark, but the silence felt different today. It wasn't the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of a vacuum. Jax, she called out. She walked into the living room. The tripod was gone. The ring light was gone. The gaming console that had been the center of Jax's existence was gone. Panic, cold and nauseating, rose in her throat. She ran to the bedroom. The closet doors were open. His side was bare. No hoodies. No designer sneakers she had bought him. No duffel bags. On the unmade mattress, there was no note. Jax wasn't the kind of man who wrote letters that required depth. Instead, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A notification from Instagram. She pulled it out, her hands shaking so hard she almost dropped it. It was a story update from Jax. The location tag was Marina District. The photo showed two hands holding craft cocktails against the backdrop of the Golden Gate Bridge. One hand was Jax's. She recognized the watch she had bought him. The other hand belonged to a girl with perfect manicured nails and a wrist full of Cartier bracelets. The caption read, "New levels. New devils. Grateful for the upgrade. Hashtag manifesting hashtag power couple." Natalie stared at the screen until it went black. He hadn't just left. He had traded up. He had found a new investor. She sat down on the edge of the bed. The smell of the room, stale sweat and cheap body spray, made her gag. She had given up a penthouse for this. She had given up a man who would have died for her, a man who checked the tire pressure on her car every Sunday, for a boy who stole her rent money and announced his departure via a hashtag. She reached for her phone again. She needed help. She needed a lifeline. Her thumb hovered over the contacts. Her parents? They had stopped talking to her after the divorce, ashamed of the scandal. Her friends? They were Lucas's friends first. They had cut her off the moment the truth came out. She opened the search bar on her browser. She typed the name she hadn't dared to look up in 2 years. Lucas Vance. She hit enter. The results populated, but they weren't social media profiles. There was no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter. Lucas had scrubbed his personal digital footprint clean. Instead, the results were professional. Vance and Associates named top forensic firm in Chicago. Lucas Vance promoted to senior partner. The art of the audit. An interview with Lucas Vance. She clicked on the image tab. There was a photo from a business gala in Chicago 6 months ago. Lucas was wearing a tuxedo. He looked older, yes, but in a way that spoke of gravitas. His jawline was sharper. His eyes were clear. And standing next to him, her hand resting possessively on his arm, was a woman. She was striking, not in a flashy, Instagram way, but in a way that screamed intelligence and class. Natalie zoomed in on Lucas's face. He wasn't smiling, but he looked solid, unbreakable. He looked like a man who had rebuilt his foundation with reinforced steel. He didn't look like he missed her. He didn't look like he was suffering. Natalie dropped the phone on the bed. The eviction notice lay on the floor near her feet. She looked around the room. She had no money. She had no home. She had no husband. And now, she didn't even have the illusion that it was worth it. She curled up on the bare mattress, pulling her knees to her chest. The apartment was freezing. The heating bill hadn't been paid in 2 months. She closed her eyes, trying to conjure the feeling of the heated floors in the Pacific Heights master bathroom, the smell of Lucas's freshly pressed shirts, the safety of a life she had called boring. She realized now that boredom was a luxury. Chaos was just another word for ruin. And she was ruined. 3 years is a long time in the financial world. In 3 years, markets crash, bubbles burst, and fortunes change hands. For Lucas, 3 years was exactly the amount of time it took to turn himself from a man who built safety nets into a man who cut them. He stood in the corner office of the Chicago firm, looking out at the skyline. The gray at his temples was new, as was the bespoke cut of his Italian suit. He didn't look like the weary husband who used to balance checkbooks at the kitchen island anymore. He looked like a shark in calm waters. "The assignment is San Francisco," the managing director said, tossing a thick file onto the glass table. "Horizon Global. They're a real estate conglomerate. Over-leveraged, bloated, and bleeding liquidity. The board wants a full restructuring. They want the fat trimmed." Lucas didn't turn around immediately. San Francisco. The name still carried a phantom weight, like an old injury that ached when it rained. "Horizon Global," Lucas repeated. "That's a large portfolio. Residential and commercial. They bought up a dozen boutique agencies during the boom," the director said. "Now the market is correcting, and they're drowning in overhead. We need someone to go in there, audit the books, and decide which assets and which personnel are worth keeping. You're the best we have, Lucas. But I know you have history in the Bay. Lucas turned. His face was a mask of professional indifference. My history is liquidated. I'll take the file. He flew out the next morning. Not in coach, not even in first-class commercial. The firm chartered a private jet for their senior partners on high-stakes restructuring cases. It was a statement. When Lucas Vance arrived, it wasn't a visit, it was an invasion. As the plane descended over the Bay Area, the fog was there, waiting for him. But this time, Lucas didn't feel the suffocating dampness. He looked down at the Golden Gate Bridge, at the sprawling hills of Pacific Heights where he had once lost everything, and he felt nothing but the cold calculation of the job ahead. He checked into the St. Regis. The company had booked the executive suite. He unpacked his bag, a single, black leather weekender. He placed his laptop on the desk. He didn't call old friends. He didn't drive past his old house. He ordered a scotch, neat, and opened the employee roster for Horizon Global. He scanned the list of sales associates. Hundreds of names. And there, on page 14, buried in the Junior Associates, Distressed Properties Division, was the name. Natalie Vance. She had kept his last name. Likely because it was the only thing attached to her that still had a credit rating. Lucas stared at the name. Distressed Properties. The irony was almost too perfect. She wasn't selling multi-million-dollar dream homes anymore. She was moving foreclosures, short sales, the bottom of the barrel. Meanwhile, across the city, in a cramped cubicle at the Horizon Global headquarters, Natalie was staring at a memo on her screen. Her blazer was from Zara, bought on sale. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, lacking the expensive blowout she used to consider a necessity. The dark circles under her eyes were poorly concealed. "Did you hear?" whispered Jessica, the receptionist, leaning over the partition. "The consultants from Chicago are coming tomorrow. They say they're sending the hatchet man." Natalie rubbed her temples. Her head was pounding. She was 2 months behind on her credit card payments. She was living in a studio apartment in a bad part of Oakland, commuting an hour each way because she couldn't afford gas for the Honda. "I can't lose this job, Jess," Natalie whispered, her voice trembling. "I have nothing else. If they cut the sales team." "They say this guy is brutal," Jessica continued, eyes wide with gossip. "They say he doesn't care about tenure or excuses. He just looks at the numbers. If you aren't bringing in revenue, you're gone." Natalie looked at her sales figures for the quarter. They were dismal. The market was hard, and her confidence was shot. Clients could smell desperation, and Natalie reeked of it. "I need to close the Daily City listing," Natalie muttered to herself, panic rising in her chest. "If I close that, maybe I'll be safe." She didn't know that the decision had already been made. She didn't know that the man coming to decide her fate wasn't looking at her sales figures. He was the man who had once looked at her with love, the man she had called boring, the man she had traded for a fleeting moment of excitement. In the hotel suite, Lucas closed the laptop. He walked to the window and looked out at the glittering lights of the city. He wasn't coming for revenge. Revenge was emotional. Revenge was messy. He was coming for an audit. And in an audit, you simply removed what didn't add value. "See you tomorrow, Natalie," he whispered to the glass. The conference room at Horizon Global was designed to intimidate. It was a glass cage suspended on the 35th floor, offering a panoramic view of the fog rolling over the Transamerica Pyramid. Inside, the air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees, but Natalie was sweating. She sat in the back row, squeezed between a junior analyst and the coffee cart. She kept her head down, pretending to scribble notes on her legal pad, praying that the consultants from Chicago would focus on the senior management and leave the sales team alone. She needed this paycheck. She had $64 in her bank account, and rent was due in 3 days. "Attention, everyone," the CEO of Horizon Global said, his voice tight. He stood at the head of the table, looking like a man who hadn't slept in a week. "Please welcome the restructuring team from Vance and Associates." Vance. Natalie's pen stopped moving. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. It was a common name. It had to be a coincidence. There were thousands of Vances in finance. The double doors swung open. 3 people walked in. 2 associates in gray suits carrying laptops, and then, a step behind them, the senior partner. He didn't walk, he glided. He wore a navy bespoke suit that fit him with architectural precision. His shoes were polished to a black mirror shine. He carried no notes, no laptop, no props. He didn't need them. Natalie looked up. The air left her lungs in a silent, painful rush. It was Lucas, but it wasn't the Lucas she remembered. The man she had married had a softness to him, a hesitation in his posture, a way of looking at her like she was the sun, and he was just a planet lucky to be in orbit. This man was cold fusion. He radiated a terrifying, contained energy. He was leaner, his jawline sharper, his hair cut in a severe, executive style that highlighted the gray at his temples. He stood at the head of the table, placing his hands on the mahogany surface. He scanned the room. His eyes moved from face to face, analyzing, calculating, dismissing. "Good morning," Lucas said. His voice was deep, steady, and devoid of warmth. "I am Lucas Vance. My firm has been retained to assess the viability of this organization." He paused, letting the silence settle. "I have spent the last 48 hours reviewing your financials," he continued, pacing slowly. "They are sentimental. You are holding on to assets that lost their value years ago. You are funding projects based on hope rather than data. And you are employing personnel who are not generating a return on investment." A collective shiver went through the room. Natalie shrank into her chair. "Please don't see me. Please don't see me." Lucas turned to the whiteboard. "We will be consolidating departments. The Distressed Properties Division," he said, writing the words in sharp, capital letters, "has underperformed for 6 consecutive quarters. It is a drain on resources." That was Natalie's department. "We will be conducting individual performance reviews starting at 2 o'clock, Lucas announced, capping the marker. He turned back to the room. His gaze swept the back row. It happened in slow motion. His eyes passed over the junior analyst, passed over the coffee cart, and then landed on her. Natalie held her breath. She waited for the flicker of recognition. She waited for the shock, the anger, the hurt. Anything to show that their 7 years of marriage meant something. She waited for him to acknowledge that she was the woman who had slept in his bed, the woman who had broken his heart. Lucas looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. His expression did not change. His pulse did not visibly quicken. His eyes were like the lens of a camera, recording the image but feeling nothing about the subject. He looked at her not as his ex-wife, but as a low-performing employee in a failing division. He looked through her. Then, he moved his gaze to the next person. "This meeting is adjourned," Lucas said. "Check your emails for your interview slots. If you do not receive an email by noon, you may pack your personal belongings and report to HR for your severance package." He turned and walked out of the room, flanked by his associates. The room erupted into chaos. People were checking their phones, whispering, crying. Natalie sat frozen in the back row. She was shaking uncontrollably. The humiliation was total. She had expected him to hate her. Hate was a connection. Hate meant she still had power over him. But he didn't hate her. He had audited her, and he had found her irrelevant. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A single email notification. From Executive Assistant to Lucas Vance. Subject: Performance Review. 2:15 p.m. Ms. Vance. Mr. Vance will see you in Boardroom B. Please bring your sales reports for the last fiscal year. Natalie stared at the screen. She wasn't just a number. She was an appointment. And she had to walk into that room and beg the man she destroyed to let her keep the scraps of her life. The door to Boardroom B was heavy, made of frosted glass and brushed steel. Natalie stood outside it for a full minute, smoothing her skirt with sweating palms. She checked her reflection in the glass. She looked tired. She looked desperate. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman on the brink of total collapse. She knocked. "Enter." A voice came from inside. It was a command, not an invitation. Natalie pushed the door open. Lucas was seated at the far end of the long conference table. The room was stark, illuminated by the harsh white light of the overcast afternoon. He didn't stand up. He didn't smile. He was reading a file, her personnel file. "Sit down, MS. Vance," he he said, not looking up. Natalie walked the length of the table. The clicking of her heels sounded deafening in the silence. She sat in the chair opposite him. The distance between them felt like an ocean. Lucas, she started, her voice cracking. Mr. Vance, he corrected, turning a page. This is a performance review. Let's keep it professional. Natalie flinched as if he had slapped her. She placed her meager folder on the table. My numbers. The market has been impossible. The interest rates killed the buyer pool. I just need more time. I have a few leads in Daly City that are about to close. Lucas finally looked up. His eyes were clear, dark, and utterly impenetrable. I've reviewed the leads. They are cold. You haven't had a closing in 4 months. You are costing the firm $45,000 a quarter in base salary and benefits, with a return of 0. I can turn it around, she pleaded, leaning forward. I just need a chance. Please. I have nowhere else to go. Lucas closed the file. He interlaced his fingers and rested them on the table. The gold wedding band was gone from his left hand. In its place was a Patek Philippe watch, complex, expensive, and ticking with relentless precision. That isn't a metric this firm considers, he said. Natalie couldn't take it anymore. The professional facade crumbled. Tears spilled over her lashes, ruining the concealer she had carefully applied. Stop it, Lucas. Just stop. She sobbed. It's me. It's Natalie. I'm your wife. I was your wife. How can you sit there and look at me like I'm a stranger? I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm drowning here. Jax took everything. He left me with nothing. I'm living in a studio in Oakland. I'm eating ramen. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. She reached across the table, trying to touch his hand. Lucas pulled back calmly, as if avoiding a spill. I know, Lucas said. His voice was soft, but it lacked any warmth. I know Jax left you. I know you're broke. I know you're sorry. Then help me, she whispered. Please. Just. Don't fire me. Maybe we could get coffee. We could talk. I miss you, Lucas. I miss who we were. Lucas stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. The fog was clearing, revealing the sharp, jagged skyline. You don't miss me, Natalie, he said, his back to her. You miss the safety. You miss the bills being paid. You miss the lifestyle I provided. He turned around. The look on his face was terrifyingly empty. You told me once that I was boring, that I was just an ATM, that you wanted an investment with high returns, something exciting. He walked back to the table and picked up her file. You made your investment. You bet on chaos. You bet on passion, and the market corrected. Lucas, please. I audited your file, Natalie. You are a liability. You bring emotional volatility and financial instability into any environment you occupy. I cannot in good conscience recommend you for retention. He dropped the file on the table. It made a dull, final thud. You are terminated, effective immediately. HR has your severance check. It's 2 weeks' pay. I suggest you budget it carefully. Lucas checked his watch. I have a flight to catch. My fiancée is waiting for me in Chicago. Fiancée. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Lucas walked toward the door. As he passed her, Natalie reached out and grabbed his sleeve. Lucas, you can't just leave me here. I have nothing. What am I supposed to do? Lucas stopped. He looked down at her hand on his suit fabric. He didn't shake it off. He simply looked at it until she let go out of shame. You wanted to be independent, Natalie, he said. You wanted to be free of my suffocating perfection. You have exactly what you asked for. He opened the door. The hum of the busy office rushed in. Phones ringing, people talking, the sound of business moving forward. I'm closed for business, Natalie. He stepped out, and the door swung shut. Natalie sat alone in the glass room. She looked at her reflection in the polished table. She looked at the empty chair where Lucas had sat. She realized then that the silence she had hated so much in their marriage wasn't emptiness. It was peace. And now, listening to the buzz of the office where she no longer belonged, she knew she would never hear that peace again. She put her head in her hands and wept, not for the husband she lost, but for the investor she had foolishly, irrevocably bankrupt. The audit was over.